Good evening. We're going to get started in a minute. I just wanted to announce that when we have questions and answers today, in order for the video feed to hear your question, there will be a microphone, and we have a runner who will bring the microphone to you. So if you'd wait to ask your question with the microphone, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Hello, hello. How's everybody doing tonight? Thank you for the warm welcome. My name is Eric Burns. I am a candidate with the MSMA program here at PLU. I'm here today to introduce you to our keynote speaker. But before I begin, I would like to say thank you to the Port of Tacoma for their sponsorship. Thank you for your contribution in helping our Lutes in their academic and professional growth today. Our speaker is known for challenging boundaries. She graduated from West Point in their first decade of women graduates, to then become the Deputy Director of Military Information Systems. And so, I'd like to take a second to thank her for her service as we approach this upcoming Veterans Day. Thank you. She has also become a tech marketing leader. Her career spans Procter Gamble, Microsoft, and mobile experience agencies. She is a strong proponent of military veteran hiring and helped pioneer the first tech transition program for transitioning service members. An advocate for diversity and women leaders in STEAM, she founded Mobile Mixers and mBolden Seattle, which champions women in digital. She recently won the mBolden People's Choice Award for her work as global president of the nonprofit. She is currently a partner and head of marketing for TA Group, a private equity and investment firm in Bellevue. She is also a leadership, brand, and communications coach. If you have the opportunity, ask her about her 50 firsts, the 50-plus new things that she tried this year. She earned a Master's of Science in Information Systems Management from the University of Southern California and a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from the United States Military Academy at West Point. As you can see, she has accomplished some amazing things. So please join me in giving her a warm welcome. Welcome, Miss Sheryl Tullis.
Thanks. Thank you. That sounds like a lot to live up to. Well, thanks for coming out tonight. I'm surprised to see so many during the dinner hour, but obviously the food helps. I figure if you are interested in this topic, you either have a growth mindset and want to learn something about that, you're going to get course credit, or you just have schadenfreude and you really enjoy others' misfortunes. So whatever it is, I'm here for you. I'm especially proud to be here during Military Appreciation Month. I might have done all those things that he mentioned, but really the foundation of it all was being a military veteran. It's what taught me leadership skills, and it may have been a non-traditional path, but I'd like to share that and maybe even bust a few myths about veterans for you. All right, worked right up until now. Yeah, possibly locked. So who here is familiar with what West Point is? Raise your hands if you have heard of it. A lot of times on the left coast, people aren't quite as familiar with the military academies. And no, I really wasn't either as a child, but it is a place where it is a very different sort of education. And I'll get into some of those differences later. But in general, it's an engineering school. It's a 4-year engineering school. It's located about an hour from New York City, just up the Hudson River. right, where the Canadian winds blow down and freeze you to death all the time, especially if you're from Florida. And it is also like a 4-year boot camp. So we do military training round the year, and in the summers, we especially have a focus on it and doing military tactics. After we graduate from West Point, we're commissioned as officers in the United States Army, and we're sent to all parts of the world to serve. We have a minimum commitment of 5 years of service, and then after that, we can either be in the reserves or we can move on to civilian life or stay in for a career. And so people take all of those paths. Thanks. All right, so this is what the place looks like. We fondly call it the Hudson High School. So that's, and that's me. When the cadets do a parade, it's called a review. That's me doing the announcements of what's happening during my senior year. So, you know, with all of the experience I had, 4 years of leadership training at school, then 5 years in the Army afterwards, and then reserve time after that, I had about 12 years of maybe the best leadership training and experience possible internationally before I ever set foot in corporate America. And if I learned one thing, leadership is about motivating people. So let's start there. Raise your hand if you've ever seen one of these old school motivational posters. Teamwork, you know, with the crew team gliding in unison across a misty morning lake. Or make it happen with the rugged mountain peaks and the hero climbing there standing amongst the clouds. But how many of you have also seen the parody ones called demotivators with slightly less aspirational captions, like procrastination? Hard work often pays off after time, but laziness always pays off now. In fact, at school, we had a saying for this: if you wait till the last minute, it only takes a minute. Forget you heard that. Yeah. So motivation, if all it takes is a pretty poster and a cute saying to motivate you, you probably have a very easy job, the kind robots are going to be doing soon. And mistakes. It could be that the purpose of your life is only to serve as a warning to others. So I'm here to serve as that warning. I've seen some pitfalls, I've made all the mistakes, and I'd love to share some of them with you in hopes that you don't have to. Now, I'm living proof that you can have a successful career by screwing up, but if you can avoid some of the things that I've done, then maybe it'll a little bit smoother of a path for you. So first, let's talk about what a career even is, what a career path looks like. A lot of people talk about climbing the corporate ladder and the rungs of success, but I actually agree with Sheryl Sandberg here that it's not really a ladder, it's much more like a jungle gym, where you might have to move from side to side or go down to go back up. And that's what it really looks like to navigate a job, whether that's in profit or for-profit, profit or nonprofit. So to put it in language I understand better, it's more like an obstacle course. And we're all going to hit these walls. But what's happening here on the left? Exactly, teamwork. So once somebody else gets up to the top of an obstacle, they reach a hand back down, they grip hands and pull somebody else along. So that's what we're going to do here. And I'm going to start with freshman fails. Now, I didn't maybe have a typical college experience, and I could probably fill the whole hour just with all the ways I screwed up as a freshman or a plebe at West Point. Here are some lovely photos back in the day. Graduated in the first decade that women were even there, and they tried their hardest to make us look like guys. And this is how beautiful and decorative our rooms were. Nice and neat. And this is my very first day. The very first day that you enter, you get yelled at a lot, guys get their hair all cut off, and you learn to march, and you do a parade. So I'm looking really happy right there. Plebes are required to memorize vast amounts of information every day. They have to shine their shoes and polish their brass. They have to clean the rooms, get ready for inspection. They have 18 credit hours a semester, a load. It goes up from there. I had 21 at one point. We also have mandatory sports. We have mandatory practicing of military skills. And in your free time, you can do club activities if you'd like. So it's a really busy time. And we also have fun summers where you get to do all sorts of outdoor activities the entire time. But where the real landmines lay was meal times. If you've ever been to West Point, this is one of the most spectacular places. It's a dining hall that has 6 different wings and battle flags and streamers and huge murals. A beautiful place if you're allowed to look around, which we were not. And so all 4,400 cadets sit down to eat at the same time. It's family style. We sit at tables of 10. And when I was there, their plebes had to do the duties of the table, like serve the beverages, serve the soup, and serve the dessert. Now, serving the dessert was a special kind of hell. So you always had to know all of the upperclassmen's preferences at the table, and a preference might be something like, no red drinks, I only want tea on Tuesdays, I want soup if the weather is below 55 degrees, 3 full ice cubes, no shrapnel, and ask me about dessert. Well, the reason they would ask you about dessert is they always wanted to make sure that you had to cut an odd number of pieces of pie. And so we carried these templates around. These are hand-drawn templates made with compasses, and we had to have them folded up, double-bagged inside our hat. And the way it worked is you would take it out, and you would put a piece of bread on the pie or cake as a riser. Then you would put the template on and make the marks around it, and then cut the cake, and then present it for inspection to your table commandant. Well, one lucky day, I had the most terrifying of all desserts, the German chocolate cake. The nuts and the sticky frosting made it almost impossible to cut. But I was doing a good job. I was like making all my nice, neat, clean lines and feeling pretty confident. I was folding up my template, putting away, and it drifted back down onto the cake after I'd removed the bread. So when I peeled it peeled up all the frosting and half of the cake with it. Still had to present it to the table commandant, and he was not impressed with my work. In fact, he was so not impressed with my work that he proceeded to tell me how unimpressed he was with my skills and with my general existence. And then he had me go around the entire wing of the mess hall, showing every other table commandant my cake. So while I was doing this and not eating for the entire meal, my 2 classmates were sitting there also not eating for the entire meal. Now, this is a very minor example of screwing up, but and the consequences really were just demerits and a couple of hungry classmates. But what happened was I had failed to keep attention to detail all the way through the task. And almost every hazing activity at West Point is designed to teach you attention to detail or prioritization. So the fail here, don't lose focus and attention to detail. Work all the way through the task. And when you do fail, own up to your mistakes. When that situation gets sticky, you just have to face the music and then move on. Next, I'm going to talk about rules, and there's a little subliminal message in there that you might notice. Rules, I like to call them guidelines, actually. So it's nice if you follow rules of society. I mean, they're there for a reason, right? But sometimes they just don't make a lot of sense. And so if you follow the rules, you're just reinforcing some stupid tradition. So you have to know when to bend and break the rules. I was a young Army officer, and I was stationed in Germany, and I became pregnant right around the time that my husband was relocated to a post another hour away. So I was second in charge of 7 different military communities and information systems. We actually had another site right next to my husband's post, 6 miles away. But my commander wanted to see his people every day. So he kept me driving 2 hours each day on the Autobahn. Well, this was okay because he's a lieutenant colonel, he outranks me, I'm a lieutenant, so I didn't push back until I had a doctor's appointment and my amniotic fluid was dangerously low. And at that point, my doctor put me on bed rest in the post hospital until my commander would agree to move me down there. And my doctor was a colonel, and he outranked my boss, a lieutenant colonel, so he got to pull rank on him, and it worked. But really what he did was reframe the situation for my boss. So instead of, she's going to be out of your sight, now the options were, she's going to be on bed rest for the foreseeable future and paid, or she can work just 50 miles away. So Once it was reframed into those two options, it became a much more attractive choice for my boss to let me move. So that's an example of standing up for what you need, but also getting help in your corner when you need it. And, I was able to move, but the reframing is the important point. Has anybody ever heard of reframing in your marketing classes? No? I'll talk about it a little bit more then. First of all, you can reframe any situation. It can be your personal mindset in an uncomfortable situation, or it can be a product reframing. So this is an example from Procter Gamble. I'm sure everybody's familiar with baby wipes and their purpose. At the time, P&G wanted to expand its technology into other areas. So what they did was say, I know, we're going to make it into a beauty care product. And we're going to get women to pay a lot more money because they're going to pay for the Olay branding on it. Well, that didn't really work very well because women didn't want to use a butt wipe on their face. So they were missing out until they reframed it as Olay Daily Facials. So suddenly, these butt wipes are now better than a daily facial that you might pay $100 for, right? So it became a more attractive option. And women started buying it, and that's how you charge 5 times more for essentially the same product. So reframing works. It creates opportunities. It creates new brand categories, and it also can create opportunities for you. So don't accept the rules just because they're the rules. They're guidelines. And get somebody in your corner to make a change if you need to. This book is a book I recommend to center you in what's most important. Start with why. So it's kind of about your purpose, and then once you have your purpose, you can fight for the things that are right for you and the rules that are right for you. Next is disruption. So after I left the military, I joined Procter Gamble, which is the consumer goods giant. They're located in Cincinnati, and they have a bunch of billion-dollar businesses. One of those is Folgers. Has anyone ever heard of Folgers? Has anyone ever heard of Jakarta? Yeah, I didn't think so. I'm going to tell you why. I was in charge of test marketing new food and beverage innovations. So I would go to a test market. We would put things out like we had this ready-to-drink coffee back in 1997 that tasted great. We had it in like slushy machines in convenience stores. Consumers loved it. This was before Frappuccino was ever put out in bottles. And we thought we had a winner. So when we did the sales projections based on the test market, they came in lower than 100 million. Not too far lower, but less than 100 million. And unfortunately, $100 million was the bar for the coffee category, because any investment you made that was not Folgers took away from the ability to sell that brand. And it was a flagship brand that where just a percentage of a share of consumers would mean millions of dollars. So they had to have a $100 million bar, or else they just wanted to keep that money in Folgers. Well, so when we introduced it in 97, Frappuccino then launched their bottles and started distributing it through Pepsi. This was another kind of nail in the coffin for Jakarta. So we actually shut it down after that test market and didn't enter the market. Well, was this the right call? I want you to be the judge. Because in 2001, we started seeing the category of ready-to-drink coffee grow by 34% a year. And at that time, I had moved on the brand, but P&G decided to relaunch Jakarta under the Folgers name. Over the next 2 years, the coffee category took off, but Starbucks now was the first mover advantage, and they had the lion's share. So at that point, Jakarta only had a 4.3% share, and it wasn't really moving because Starbucks had just dominated the marketplace. 2013, it was a billion-dollar brand, but we weren't able to keep up, and they shuttered the product again. And so the important thing is this question: how many of you drink any kind of Folgers product today? And guess how old all the people who drink Folgers are. So by refusing to disrupt the brand, what they did, let me move my little beans here. What they did was fail to invest in the innovation of the core business. And this is the classic innovator's dilemma. And if you're interested, I recommend this book. But by failing to innovate, they really wrote their own demise. And now Folgers is becoming a dying brand, and they eventually sold it off. So this is a lesson in don't be afraid to disrupt your business or even what you're doing personally for your career just because you're afraid, because you want to protect what you have now. That is a sure death knell. Next is expectations. So by 2001, I had already moved out to Seattle with my husband, and I took a job at a health tech startup. It was pretty cool. It was angel funded by Procter Gamble because they had a healthcare division, so that's how I found out about it. And I was coming in as their second marketer, and I was going to help them take a new product to market. Now, you're going to be super impressed with this technology because this is way before Fitbits, way before Apple Watches. We actually had one of the first health and fitness tracking software on the market. We had this device that would measure your resting metabolic rate so that it understood exactly how many calories you needed to burn. And then we had the logging of it software built into the Palm Pilot. Has anybody actually ever seen a Palm Pilot in the wild? Yeah, very, very few of us. And when I got in there, I was working in the product team in Seattle, and the headquarters was in California. I could see that we were in trouble because the product wasn't really well defined. We were trying to get into a beta test really quickly to please the investors, but none of the features that the investors were expecting had been built yet. And so I kind of went into my product management mode that I learned at P&G, where you focus on the market research and then the user experience and the supply chain and the packaging and the go-to-market plan and so forth. Well, after 6 weeks of that and trying to fix all of that side of it, my boss said, "Where's your marketing plan?" And I said, "Oh, well, here it is. Here's what we're doing." She's like, "No, where's the advertising and promotion plan?" Which to me came last. And I realized right then we had a disconnect. They had hired me without a job description. I hadn't insisted on one. And suddenly it was not really clear what my role was, what I was supposed to be doing. And I was missing something that was key to her, which is let's get into test market. So I pivoted, and I quickly did a marketing plan, and we went into test market 6 weeks later. But when I went to read the results in Vancouver, BC, they weren't good. We had missed things like training store personnel and some other things that would have been vital along that process. So when customers walked into the store, they didn't even really know we were there. They didn't know how to use it, and the employees didn't know how to help them use it. So this was a big miss, and I went back to report the results. The feedback I got was that I hadn't worked hard enough. Okay. The next weekend, though, they came up and shut down the Seattle office and moved everybody to the headquarters. So I didn't have long to fret about it because I was no longer a part of the company and not invited to move, which was just fine with me because I didn't like how things were going. But this is a cautionary tale of making sure expectations are clear up front. I hadn't asked for a job description. They hadn't provided one. And so we didn't set success criteria together. And that's a huge miss. And then it was even worse because the company had missed expectations with their investors. They hadn't really clearly communicated what was going on in the market, and that led to eventual mistrust and lack of funding going forward. So after about a year and a half, they also closed. So this all has a cascading effect, but you can prevent it. Who's heard of a marketing brief or creative brief? Anybody use one? So when marketing teams work with agencies or with clients and customers, this is a key document that you can use, and it just really sets expectations for what are we here trying to do? What are the results? What are the success metrics? How do we do that? And what's going to be driving traffic to this and from this? So I really highly recommend the creative brief principles with anything, with any project you're taking on or anything you're trying to do in life where you need to make sure everybody's on the same page. So just look up creative brief. Friction. After I left the startup, my brilliant career of 3 months at the startup. I joined Microsoft. I joined in the SQL Server team. I could barely spell SQL, but I was able to communicate the business benefits of a database. And I began to position SQL Server as the dark horse in this 3-horse race, which until that time was really just IBM and Oracle. Those were the only 2 players, the big players in database at the time. So we were slowly and steadily gaining progress and getting, moving out of being a departmental database into an enterprise-wide database when we almost screwed it all up. Now today, Azure Data is what it's known as, and you might have heard last week that the government awarded the multi-billion-dollar JEDI contract to Microsoft for this. So it's a thriving business today, even beating out AWS, but we almost killed it. Because on January 24th, 2003, SQL Slammer ate the internet. You're all too young to remember this probably, but it was the fastest growing worm and Trojan attack and denial service of all time at that point. Within 15 minutes of infecting its first victim, it had spread worldwide. It took down the internet, sites didn't work, businesses didn't run, payments couldn't process, email didn't work, digital calls, including 911, did not work, and airlines didn't fly. This was a very bad day. And the worst thing was what caused it. It was an exploit of a known vulnerability that had been published 6 months prior. There was a patch available for it, but the SQL admins hadn't patched it worldwide. And why was that? It's because we made it too hard. My husband worked at Microsoft at the time, and he had applied this patch to 4 servers. It took him 45 minutes each with a lot of manual interaction. So he sent a note to the SQL architects and said, how's this going to work in a data center with hundreds of machines? They're not going to patch it. And he got back a terse reply, SQL admins are used to it. And that was hubris. And that was a fatal fail. Because we really destroyed everything we had built at that moment and lost over $1 billion in the process. So I remember a lot of sleepless nights working around the clock for about 4 months. We just worked 24/7 to try to get healthy again, working with our partners, working with our customers to find fixes. And during that time, it was awful, but suddenly we had a problem that code wasn't going to solve alone. We had to focus on business, we had to focus on communications, and those things are in my wheelhouse. So for the first time, I had this opportunity to lead. And so one message there is when there's a crisis, that's an opportunity. You got to see it as an opportunity to lead. And we did build the trust and get healthy again, but it took a lot of people pulling together. And the most important thing was that was a pivot point for the entire industry. And trustworthy computing became the gospel. Patch Tuesdays still happen today to have a regular cycle when admins know that patches are coming, so they don't just have to go and look it up themselves. And that's what's made it secure and safe again, and that's why the business is where it is today. But why did it get there? Why did it get to that point? It's because nobody asked, how might we? How might we make this situation better? How can we reduce friction for our users and for our core audiences? This is a question that was written up in How to Simplify Any Problem in the Harvard Business Review, and it's really just part of design thinking. Take a problem, turn it into a how might we question, and then solve it from there. So anytime you're up against a challenge, big or small, this can be a way to help go through it and not limit your thinking. How might we do this? Next is about focus. Focus is always an issue for me. You heard all the things that I have done, and I'm kind of always moving from one thing to another. Well, I took this role as Chief of Staff to the Chief Marketing Officer at Microsoft. And that was a 540-person organization. She had all of the vice presidents of all their respective functions reporting to her. And so that was the staff that I managed. And this was a really dual job. On one hand, I was her speechwriter, so I was talking about all the shiny, exciting things and causing sizzle over here. And on the other side, I was the business manager. I was keeping the trains running on time. I was keeping finance going, the head count, and all the things that had to happen to have an organization efficient. So if it needed to happen, I made sure it happened. If it was falling through the cracks, I caught it. And if it wasn't resourced, I did it and took it on. And that was dumb. Don't do that. Because I lost sight of what was really important to Mitch during all of that. So she had, just a few core things that she was excited about. And so when I was working over here in the shiny stuff, she was really excited. When I was working over here on keeping the trains running on time, that wasn't part of her value prop. That wasn't what she needed to show her boss. And it took me a while to recognize that. So I started using the Eisenhower box. Has anybody seen the Eisenhower box before? It's also called the urgent and important matrix. And I started just stacking all my priorities into these 4 boxes. Obviously, you want to work in the things that are urgent and important. And then you want to either delay or delegate or just get rid of the rest. And when I could have that conversation with my boss every week about what my priorities were, we could align on what was really most important for her. And this helped me a lot. And I still use this today with my direct reports. Eisenhower developed this as part of his time in the military, too. He used this when he was the president to run his cabinet. So the faux pas, the fail here, is trying to do everything. That's not the path to success. Be strategic and choose and focus on what's most important to your boss and what they need to accomplish. All right, being exclusive, exclusivity. So my last role at Microsoft was head of the marketing profession. So 7,700 marketers worldwide. We were creating all of the tools that they needed to use, best practices around the world, running events and doing readiness for them. So I had this really great global team. They were masters of their craft. But there was this one person who just didn't seem to fit in. She always was the naysayer in our planning meetings, and it started to feel like she was Eeyore. Always finding the fault in things, and never really excited. She also didn't come to any of our team events, and we were a pretty tight team. I was at a loss of how to motivate her. Until we did this exercise. We called someone in to do the Strength Finder 2.0. And when we did that, we discovered something about Paula. Paula had skills that none of us had. She was the person who could take any idea and make it better because she had those strengths. The rest of us are running around here with our shiny stuff and our ideas. Paula was the one who was responsible for delivery, and she wanted to do it with excellence. So she always pointed out the flaws and everything to make us better. And once the team realized that there was this gap, we started to see she was actually more like Kanga. She was protecting us and nurturing us along. Here's what the domains of team strength are, and you can see that individuals usually have top 5 and top 10 strengths in any of these. Well, we didn't have some of the key ones on the strategic thinking and the executing side that she did, and so we had a huge gap as a team without her. Once the team realized this and started using her in the right way, she was suddenly engaged. She blossomed, she participated in things because now people were seeking her out to get her opinion. She was troubleshooting and making things better before we ever got it out to anybody else. And she got promoted in the next 6 months. So it was just an amazing turnaround, probably the best I've ever seen of anybody who's ever worked for me. And it was all because I changed how I viewed her. Like, I was at fault because I didn't think she was a fit for the team. And the rest of the team was queuing off of that. So don't exclude people who think differently than you. We talk about diversity and inclusion all the time, but it's not just about ethnicity and it's not about culture. It's really about people who think differently and challenge your thinking. That's what a team of rivals means, and that's what makes us successful. So after nearly 10 years at Microsoft, I left and went out into the mobile industry. I got to work at a couple of really cool mobile agencies doing IoT experiences and mobile marketing back in the early days of the bubble. This was great, but the mobile industry was super dynamic, so there were always consolidations and people buying other people. So I worked with a small company, about 50 people in the US, and then there was a German office as well. We did just high-end experiences, including in-car experiences for BMW and for Audi and for Mini. But when we reshuffled, they asked me to take over the North American division of mobile experiences, and they had another division that another colleague was going to take. This would have been a really exciting promotion for me, except that division and all the projects that were being bundled of it were not profitable. In fact, there was one project that was in the red, that was taking all the resources and sucking everything else up and creating a huge backlog. And because of that one project, we were in the red and couldn't even take on new business. So I said, fine, I'll take on this division, but I need 90 days to clean up the delivery problems. And then the next 90, I'll build the sales pipeline. Sounds reasonable. The US CEO, the US CFO, the chief operating officer, they all agreed to this, so it was a plan. Fast forward to the quarterly business review, 90 days later. We're in the black, yeah. And then the German CFO, who was sitting in, said, wait, where is your sales pipeline? I'm like, oh, no, we agreed that I would clean up delivery and then build the sales pipeline. He hadn't gotten that message. Nobody had told him, and he was furious. And I was fired the next day. It seemed unfair because I had kept up my end of the bargain, but it was business, and I had just learned a really costly lesson, which is you have to know who has the power. You have to know who the influencers are in the room, or not in the room. One of the ways we do this in project management and in marketing is by using this matrix. Some people call it RACI. There's also ORP, owner, approver, reviewer, participant. But it's really important if you're starting any kind of project to understand the key players and their responsibilities. So I highly recommend using this method just to make sure you have all the people you need to consult and people who need to be in the know, people who need to give feedback, and also who has the final sign-off. So don't ignore the influencers, or do so at your own peril, and use a responsibility matrix. Just on value real quick, I've made plenty of other mistakes too, but one of them was just not asking for a raise when I deserved it. This is hard for a lot of people. It's hard to talk about money. It's hard to have to go and justify, and you hope that your boss will see it and take care of you. But that's not how it works. So you have to understand your own value proposition. Now, marketers know this word, right? Value proposition. Who's ever done a value proposition? So, no. This is what it looks like. This is a canvas that you can use to do a value proposition. And really all it is saying, what are all the benefits? What's my value? And what are the costs? What are the pain points? And obviously, if you're taking a product to market, you try to maximize all the benefits and minimize the costs or pain points for customers. But knowing my value proposition, if I had really taken the time to do that sooner, it would have been way better because I started to doubt my own value. It started to affect how I felt about what I was delivering. And so once I finally pulled up my big girl pants and went in and said, here's how I'm feeling about what's going on, and I need a raise, my boss didn't even blink. He just asked what else I needed. So know your value because it really impacts how you feel and how you deliver, and ask for what you're worth. And I really recommend this. If you haven't read this book, it is one of the best books I read last year. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Chris was an FBI hostage negotiator. So he would go to the Philippines, negotiate hostages there, all over the place. And his point of view is, some people think of negotiating as 100, 50, 75, we'll settle there. Well, you can't do that when you're talking about hostages. You don't say, you got 10 hostages, I'll take 5. You have to get them all. And so this book has some really game-changing ways to think about how you get what you want. So Really great lessons. All right, this brings us up to present day. And this is a tale of two goals. So in 2019, among other things, I decided to, 1, get a coaching certificate, and 2, to learn to play the harmonica. Number 1 went well. I signed up for a program, got a coach and mentor who was running this program. I committed to the weekly classes. I did the nearly nightly homework most of the time. And I got feedback from the coach and feedback from my peers. I attended a capstone event, and I got my certification in September. Harmonica started out well. I bought a harmonica. I listened to some cool people play. I watched some YouTube videos and tried to play along. And I thought about signing up for a course, but I never did. So on this map of potential, I remain in the valley of disappointing harmonica players. The harmonica is actually out in my car right now. I still try to play it at lights, traffic lights and stuff. People think I'm really weird. But I didn't stick through it and get past that valley of disappointment. Maybe because I had other things, it wasn't as important. But James Clear talks about this very thing in Atomic Habits. So in Atomic Habits, it's about incremental approaches, 1% better every single day. And what I had done in number 1 with my coaching certification was I had risen to the level of my goals because I had a system in place, because you fall to the level of your systems. You can have goals or New Year's resolutions, but if you don't have the structure to keep you marching toward it, it's probably going to fail. And that's what happened with harmonica. He also has some cool tips about how to start. Like, you have to break it down to the very next thing you need to do. Like, I need to get in my car and open up that case and play a song on the way home. And another thing that I thought was really applicable to me was when I started taking this coaching certification, I had to start thinking of myself as a coach right away because I had to create all the materials and deliver them as if I was a coach. So I actually took on that identity of a coach. Well, I can guarantee you, I have not taken on the identity of a harmonica player because that would be just disappointing to all harmonica players everywhere. So another way to build a habit and get 1% better is make that part of your identity. I am this type of person. If you get 1% better every day for a year, does anybody know how that compounds? Any guesses? How much better will you be at the end of a year? 10,000? Other guesses? 37 times. So I don't know if I'm a 37 times better coach. I'm definitely not a 37 times better harmonica player. I don't even know if I'm a 2% better harmonica player. So that's where I got to work. But yeah, so it's the compound interest of habits. So think about incremental changes and systems to keep you on track. So finally, I want to loop back to another 1%. This isn't the rich 1%. This is the 1% of people who have ever served, so veterans. A lot of veterans feel like me, which is that there's probably a better way, that war should be the last possible choice, and that there are better ways to build peace and prosperity, and it's through trade, and it's through making sure that there's education in areas of conflict. And so I wanted to talk about something that I'm involved with, which is Combat Flipflops. They make cool stuff in dangerous places. I'm wearing one of the shirts. They make these scarves that are called shamas in Afghanistan. They make that jewelry is pieces of landmine, pieces of cleared ordnance. Every purchase goes to either put a girl in school for a day in Afghanistan or to clear 3 square meters of landmines. And I'm not saying this because I'm trying to get you to buy anything. I'm saying this because what these Army Rangers who started this company in Issaquah have done is figure out an entire business model, a new business model for the world, not just locally. They're making changes in Afghanistan. They're making changes in Laos. They're making changes in Colombia and Bogota where their flip-flops are made. And it's this kind of innovative thinking that we really need to go next level. It's called the Unarmed Forces is what they call their kind of supporters, their backers. And they've managed to put, I want to say it's like 4,000 days of school so far for Afghani girls. And their philosophy is you teach a girl, you can impact that whole family, and you can impact that next generation so that they have hope. So my challenge to you is to figure out how you can reach down and make something better and give somebody else hope. There's an article in The Atlantic that came out on Monday. So if you check out that bit.ly, you can learn more about it. This is a fashion faux pas on my part because I look like I'm in my pajamas. but it talks about the funding. I was the first angel funder for this company. And I've supported them because I just believed in that mission and believed in changing things a lot. But they're using just amazing marketing to go and do their job. They also went on Shark Tank a few years ago, and it is the best Shark Tank episode ever, so look that up on YouTube. And the lesson here is don't go alone. As you rise, as you climb, don't leave others behind. Think about how you can lean back and pull somebody else up with you. Tackle the audacious goals, because you're the folks who are going to do it, and I'm excited to see what you're going to do. So just to sum up here, everything all together, as you climb up, don't just accept the rules. Don't be afraid of disruption. Don't forget to align expectations. Don't make it harder. Don't cause friction. Don't do everything. Don't ignore those influencers. Don't exclude people who are different. Don't devalue your self-worth. Don't forget to learn from your mistakes and grow. And don't go alone. And I'll be happy to send this to anyone who wants to just link in with me or something. And so I just want to sum up with, if you want to go fast, you can go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I'd love to see us all climb together. Thanks for having me, and I'd love to take your questions. Who's got one? Everything's crystal clear. That's great. Go leave ratings and reviews on my LinkedIn then. Yes. Do we have a mic?
So, can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is a bit of a basic question, but how did you get into marketing in the first place?
That's a great question. As I was thinking about leaving the service, there are military recruiters, kind of military headhunters, and I went with one of those. And I was doing information systems, and so they kept trying to put me in information systems things. But I saw this company called Procter Gamble that had invented this thing called brand management. And I was really excited about it. So I asked the recruiter to show me an opportunity with Procter Gamble if they were at the hiring fair, the conference, and they were. My recruiter says, well, why would you be good for that role? I'm like, I love commercials. I can recite every commercial pretty much ever. Confidence, try and secure. Okay, really old stuff. But for me, it was actually an easy transition. I like to joke that the language is the same as the military. There's targeting and campaigns and air cover and tactics, but the shoes are way better. When I went, this is part of the military network at work, and think about this in your future days as well. I went to interview on campus, and I had dinner the night before with somebody who was also a West Point cadet or West Point grad, and he said, "Sheryl, do you know what the 4 Ps of marketing are?" I said, "No." Never heard of them. And he told me what the 4 Ps of marketing are. Who can tell me? Product, price, production, place. Yep. And product or production is, we kind of use interchangeably. Now there's another one, which is the 5th one, because participation, because of the social media. So anyway, when I got into my interviews the next day, at the senior level interview, he takes a can of Pringles, a short stack of Pringles, and plops them down in front of me. Says, "What would you do?" And I'm like, well, price, product, placement. And if I hadn't had that, that connection with that alumni, I would have failed that interview. But I walked through it, and then he just sat there all gruff and looked at me. I said, well, what did you do? And he got animated, and he talked about it, and talked about how they took it to market. And it didn't matter that I hadn't gotten a lot of the stuff right. It just mattered that I had a process and a framework to think it through. So that's how I got my job at Procter Gamble. Anything else? So just shout out a couple things. Like, what is the role that you want to take after you get your degree? Just shout out a few things. Do you have a question? Okay, shout out. Research? Okay, what else? You must have aspirations. All right, we have a bigger problem. What else? CPA. Great. What's that? Say again? CPA. User experience, UX. Love it. Love it. Design thinking. I asked just because I wanted to get a sense of it, but I work in a holding company where we review probably 30 different M&A, merger and acquisition potentials a month. Like, we see companies everywhere. So I see a lot of opportunities. We actually have staffing companies. We have 3 different staffing companies that do tech staffing, project management, marketing staffing, all that. So my offer to all of you is, if you are challenged to find the exact job and the role that you want, start networking. Start it now. Link in with me. And keep up that, because you want to start your network before you need it, right? When you graduate, then, or when you're trying to get an internship, that's when you're going to want to activate it. We have internships. So find me, find more people like me who are willing to help reach down and pull you back up over that wall. And this is probably the most important lesson I can leave you with. Like, it does take a village to get to where you want to go. I'm happy to help you. Please reach out to me. Thanks.
Thank you, Sheryl, for coming in and speaking with us today. We have a token of appreciation for you. Can we get one more round of applause for Sheryl? We'll talk after.